Hello and welcome to another video. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for the support that you have been given to this channel. In the last couple of days, I've achieved just over 1,000 subscribers, which is really good for the progress of this channel. So once again, thank you very much, everyone. So what will be today's video? Basically, I'll be looking into the fuel consumption of my car and compare the new E10 95 octane fuel with the E5 97 fuel that has been on offer for 3 years now, and see which one costs less to run or uses less fuel. I have been planning to do this fuel consumption test since I bought this car back in September 2020. But due to the changing work circumstances, the introduction of E10 fuel back on the 1st of September, and also the fuel rush madness that had affected the country until mid-October, I had to postpone the test until now. But to be honest, it is actually quite a chilly moment. It's rather wet, so I think I better go indoors and carry on the talking. It's so much better in here. So, as you might be aware, the vehicle's fuel consumption depends on several factors, such as your driving style, the condition of the vehicle, the engine, and how well it is serviced and maintained. The tires, the tire pressure, the type of fuel, aircon use, open windows, short trips, long trips, the weight you carry, the number of passengers you carry as well, and maybe how much you have for lunch. Anyway, many other things. However, there are certain factors which are really beyond your control, and that's things such as the weather and the traffic. Everything as a whole has an influence on your vehicle's consumption, hence why we all experience different fuel consumption figures. For decades, car manufacturers have been testing the fuel economy figures of their vehicles using several methods, both in labs, test tracks, and prototype tests on the road. But in recent years, due to the widespread reports of cheating mechanisms used by some manufacturers in order to fool emission tests, there has been a shift in the methods, and now they use the Worldwide Harmonized Light Vehicle Test Procedure, or WHLTP, which replaced the old method that dated back from the 1980s. The WHLTP uses real driving data collected from around the world, as opposed to the old NEDC method, which based the test on a theoretical driving profile. For many years, cars have been equipped with trip computers that have fuel consumption calculators. The majority of cars nowadays, they have an ECU which controls vital engine functions. For example, calculating how much fuel it needs to deliver to the injectors. The trip computer takes the data from the ECU and then, combined with a distance driven, it gives an MPG reading. But how accurate are these readings? From the 1st of September of this year, it became mandatory in the UK that the 95 octane fuel should contain at least 10% ethanol, and it's now labelled as E10. Gradually, all filling stations started to provide E10 fuel once the old stock of E5 had run out. But the high octane fuel with the 97 octane or more, such as PP Ultimate, Shell V-Power, and Tesco's 99 Momentum, just to name a few, remain as a protection grade with no change on the ethanol concentration of 5%. But that's going to last at least for another 5 years, so we don't know what's going to happen after that. Obviously, many vehicles are not compatible with E10, so I advise you to check your vehicle's owner's manual. I know it's something that people don't really read these days, but nevertheless, check that. Also look up on the government website, or if the car you have is from a manufacturer that no longer exists, such as a Rover, for example, or if you cannot find any information about your vehicle, the best way to do it is to consult some reputable motoring organizations or car clubs, as a matter of fact. In regards to my 2010 1.6 petrol Focus, I can safely say that it is compatible with E10, since all cars, bar a few exceptions, let's face it, made from 2010 were mandatory to be compatible with this new type of fuel. However, many cars before this date were already compatible in anticipation to the introduction of the new regulation. I'm not going to dive too much into the pros and cons on which fuel is best or worse, whether environmental claims are true or false. This is somewhat a divisive subject, and I think I needed to find out more information about it. There's plenty of sources of information, reputable ones from recognized motoring associations, and also some university studies that have really produced some data, but I think we need a little bit more on that field. So the test that I've done is purely an economical one. It's just a demonstration based on my driving, using my real-world driving, because that's one that has an impact on the running costs of my car. I do around 300 miles a week, mostly commute, and then at the end of the week I fill up the tank. The commute is fairly consistent as I drive to and from work at roughly the same time in the morning and in the late afternoon. The traffic is mild in some areas and has a proportion of about 50-50 of country lanes and dual carriageways. I am the sole passenger on one day of the week, and on the other 4 I drive with my wife. We work only a few minutes from each other and start and finish roughly at the same times, so we use our cars every other week in order to reduce fuel costs, and because it's pointless simply to use both cars at the same time. So this is what I have done. For a start, I check the tire pressures and then fill up the car to the brim. I usually, when the nozzle clicks and I hear the gargling noise coming from the filler neck. I always use the same pump, just for consistency as well. This has to be carefully done, so otherwise it can really mess up the fuel calculations. Then I go to the trip computer and then reset the partial miles counter and the MPG calculator. So I just reset everything on the OBC. I do my daily driving, and then at the end of the working week, just before I fill up, I write down the number of miles that I've done and the MPG reading on the OBC. Then I fill up the car again to the brim, write down the number of liters, and then I record everything. So I've just done the first fill up, and according to the computer it says that I will be doing 446 miles. Now let's just go and reset everything. Just do that, and it says I'm doing 40.4 miles to the gallon, which I don't think is too bad. Now just going to reset by pressing the button continuously, and average fuel reset as well. And now I'm going also to reset and the trip computer has now been reset. Okay, now let's do my usual driving. And then I drive, fill, record, repeat, etc, etc, etc. I repeat the process 3 times in order to get an average reading and to check for inconsistencies. All the figures were input in Excel spreadsheet that I've made specially for this occasion. I know there are several apps available that you can use to record your MPG and calculate and so on, but since that I needed additional information, I just needed to do it this way because it was much easier to show you the results that I'm about to show you in a moment. So how do I calculate the MPG? It is very easy. The amount of miles that I've driven times the imperial gallon, which in this case is 4.54609 liters, and I divide by the amount filled into the tank until it is full. So after I've collected all the data, this is what I get. So I've made this fuel consumption calculator where I put the number of miles that I've done and the amount of liters that I've put into the tank as soon as I did my weekly trip. And then I also record the OBC reading, as you can see in here, 41.7, 296, 33.65. And then I just do the process for a second week and then for a third week. And you can see in here that the results are pretty much consistent. But you will also notice that there is a discrepancy in the readings. So you can see that the OBC is a little bit optimistic compared to the manual calculations. I went on several car groups and I made a survey and I asked for whoever made calculations and asked if anyone found any discrepancies and so on. And most people record discrepancies of about 3 to 6% or something like that. So 4% is actually within the range. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. Let's face it, although they can be fairly accurate, they are not class release precision instruments, as far as I'm concerned. It's like your speedometer. It's not really 100% accurate anyway. So you can't expect for the MPG reader on your OBC also to be 100% accurate. Now, and these figures in here are not too far also from Ford's combined figures. And let's face it, this is a figure from pre-WHLTP method, which was done at 42.2 combined cycle. And mine, since I can consider mine as a combined because it combines the country roads with the carriageway, it's actually not too far off. So a difference optimistic of 1.7 miles to the gallon and a bit optimistic on about 4%. Also, I've added here to the figures roughly the cost after 10,000 miles. And you can see that the car will cost me about 10,000 miles. I think that's roughly how many miles I do a year. And this is how much it will cost. And this is if we keep the price per litre at 142 as of 30th of November. It's actually one of the cheapest I've found in the area that I work. It's much actually cheaper than the area I live, really. So that is the one that I use. Now, since this is E10 fuel, you probably will say to me, oh yeah, if you were not using E10, your figures will be much higher. Well, I'm not 100% sure about that. Because when E5 95 octane was around, I used to get similar figures from the trip computer. They were not really that far off from the ones I've recorded in here. But then I can't be 100% because I didn't do the same kind of tests as I did with this one. But one thing I can say is that since the introduction of E10, I haven't felt any difference on the running of the engine. Same with my older Jaguar XJ and also my wife's car. But we'll go on to that in a moment. Now, since I've done the test with the E10, it was time to do the test with E5. And I did roughly the same process, although with a few changes. Before filling up with the new fuel, I made sure that I used the old fuel in the tank to the lowest level possible, almost like driving on fumes. I know it's not advisable, but that's what I've done. And then I've put about 10 pounds worth of 97 octane fuel. I might say that I've used Shell fuel. I'm not sponsored by Shell or anything like that, just because that's the one I have to use for price comparison and also for product and consistency as well. And put about 10 pounds in it and then run to the lowest level and then fill up to the brim, just to make sure that I have as little as possible of the old E10 in there. Always the same fuel and also always the same pump. Then, just as before, I repeated the process 3 times, just as you will see now. Okay, so now I have driven 324.6 miles since I have driven with a first full tank of 97 octane fuel. And the car, according to the OBC, says that I've done 41.2 miles to the gallon. And to fill up back to the brim, I had to put 37.37 liters of fuel. Now, let's see what the manual calculations will give. And I'm going to do this again, drive, refill, repeat. So, these are the figures I come up with, exactly the same. number of miles recorded, number of liters, and then the OBC readings again. And then these MPG figures, they don't seem too far off. We can see that there is a very slight improvement, but we'll compare those in a moment. And these are a bit closer to the Ford's official figures. But then again, we can also see that there is roughly the same margin of error of about 4%, and the OBC being optimistic by 1.8%. And then because the number was on the 1600s, we can see that the cost of fuel is already, after 10,000 miles, is a little bit higher. But this was the price of the fuel as of 30th of November, and actually remained the same from mid-October up to this amount, which was the time they took for me to do this whole experience. It was a 1.569 litre, way more expensive compared to other 97 fuels like from Sainsbury's or Tesco. But because I want to use from the same brand, from the same pump, it was better to do this kind of comparison. And also, if there's a difference between the 95 octane of the same brand and the 97. So, interesting to see that there is a very slight improvement, but is it enough to be more economical compared to the E10? Let's have a look. So there we can see in here that a price at the pumps, the E5 is 14p more expensive. The MPG was slightly better. This is average, 0.2 miles to the gallon. But I would like to point out one little thing. There has been a slight, very slight drop in temperatures on the last 2 weeks of the E5 experiment. But still not too far off compared to the first week anyway. But let's just assume that the MPG will be average the same all year round. It won't be the same. Probably in the summer it will be probably a little bit better, because when the engine goes quicker to temperature, it is more efficient. My commute is at least 26 miles each way, so at least halfway through it will already be operating at temperature, not cold temperature. That's two completely different things. And you can see here that it is £151 more expensive after 10,000 miles. But how can I make it in order to break even, basically? You needed to have at least a 3p price difference between E10 and the 97 or plus octane. And then you still are at a loss of £25. But hold on this thought about the £25 loss after 10,000 miles. How many of you have used a 95 octane fuel and then use a couple of times at least one of those bottles of fuel injector cleaner? By the time you spend on those bottles, it'll already be cheaper to run on E10, on E5 rather than on E10, at least statistically. But what if the price doesn't change? How much fuel economy do you need in order to break even? And here we go. In order to be better off by 80p a year, hardly anything, you need, in my car, needs to do at least 3.9 more miles to the gallon. But is this achievable? Well, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Not until I drive in the summer and then find out the bigger averages. But here is an example of the fuel economy between the two fuels. But this is the case in my car. My car is very well serviced. I drive normally, I don't rag it. To be honest, a 1.6 Focus, you can't really rag it. It's a waste of time, really. But at least in my case, yeah, I think I can safely say that it's probably better off to use the E5. But one interesting thing that I found is that when I changed from E10 to E5, I felt no difference in the way my car ran. Still smooth, still pulling the same way. I don't think you'll notice much difference, especially in cars below 2 liters or 4-cylinder cars. non-turbo, I mean. After I gather all these results, I just made a small survey. I just asked a lot of car forums and Facebook groups around the internet, and I asked them a few questions. So I've got 331 responses only in the UK. There were some responses from abroad, but that wouldn't be good because many countries haven't introduced E10 fuel yet. Actually, Germany was the very first country to introduce the E10, I think around 2010, 2011. And there was quite a lot of controversy at the time. Because just like in the UK, many people say that it's not really that green because it wastes more fuel, and also because of the source of the fuel, especially the soya crops. And also many motorists were complaining about the fuel, but things seem to have died down for a bit. Let's see how things pan out in the UK. So I've made a survey. Since the introduction of E10, has your MPG decreased? I've put a set of 5 or 6 answers, and these are the results. 9% have said that there was a loss of power and running issues. 17% have had a drop in MPG, but no loss of power. And this is interesting, 18% have felt no effects whatsoever. And some of them, 2%, it actually improved. That is actually curious, because we know that ethanol has a lower energy density compared to petrol. Basically, to produce the same power, it needs to use a little bit more. Basically, it's that. So this is actually very interesting. And these ones, the big majority only use E5 with a 97 octanes or more. Now, the groups that I have surveyed includes older cars, from pre-1990s cars, and also some higher-end vehicles like BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, Volvo, and so on, which have tendency to have larger engines. And this is what the result came. And small percentage of people switch to E5 after having issues with E10, and some of them still use E10. Now, if I remove this bit here, about the E5 only use, this is what I've got. The percentage shifts a little bit, and still 16% have with a loss of power and running issues, but the big majority have had no problems. That's 60%, although it has been widely reported on several motoring groups, a lot of problems. But then again, the ones that say they don't have problems not really know to go into shout about it, aren't they? And 4% improved, and then you have the results can be a little bit skewed because I removed the drivers that have only used 97 octane or more fuel. Well, this is actually interesting, but to be honest, this is a very small survey that I did in 2 weeks' time. But it just kind of gathers a picture about how people feel at the moment about this new fuel. And what is my advice? Basically, my advice is just to do what you think it is right for your vehicle. Of course, for E10 fuels, it's not really good for all the vehicles. You have the problems with cork gaskets, rubber seals, metal pipes, and so on. But beware of one thing, manual cars will have those items which are already aging. And the other trouble is, and the curious thing is that you have seen a lot of stories of cars just setting alight, old classics, and those problems are already starting with E5 fuel. So it's not really just only the ethanol, it's the fact that the age of fuel delivery items that are getting old and need to be replaced. So that's one thing that you have to be very careful with. But what is the solution? Well, there are additives on the market that help you protect your vehicle for the use of E10, and also you can still use E5. But For how long? It is a protection grade fuel for the next 5 years or so. But as I said, there's still quite a bit to be researched, and I just probably would recommend you to do the same kind of test that I did, if you can be bothered really. I did, and I reached some interesting conclusions. So do the same test. Even if you don't have to do this spreadsheet and so on, just to use your OBC readings. They're not massively accurate, but they still give an idea of how much fuel you are using. Do the test yourself and see if you're actually saving money by using the 97 octane fuel. Okay, that Shell example of a 14p difference is quite extreme, but most of the times it is actually quite bad. But sometimes Tesco fuel and the momentum, the price difference is much smaller. But see and experiment and see for yourself. One more thing about these results, and this is what I found, but I didn't have time to collate more results, is that the drivers that experience more problems with E10 fuel, they run smaller engines. And also older cars from the pre-2000s. I noticed most of them noticed more problems. The ones that had less problems were the ones that had bigger engines. But most of them use that fuel sometimes, and sometimes they use the 97 octane. So it's a little bit hard to take conclusions. And that's it. This was the small study that I've done. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope I haven't bored you to death with this, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.